Hello and welcome to the first ever DSJAS devlog video. In these devlog videos they're going to be completely unedited, completely uncut, and just raw talking from the mouths of, or the mouth of me, the developer. So at the time of recording this, the trailer for DSJAS has just been released on the YouTube channel. And so far, at the time of recording this, we've got about 57 views, I think. So, saying as it only went up yesterday, that's more than I expected, to be honest. It's gaining traction quite quickly. So, I'm quite eager to push out some more stuff to talk about how this is going, because this project is really important to me, and I want to make sure that a finished product has gotten to people as soon as possible, or at least get the public beta out of the way. So, you can see here I have the DSJAS source code up, and yeah, the DSJAS source code is what I've been, mainly working with at the moment, because I've been trying to push out some of the features which I consider to have been missing. So, I'm going to run through quickly the developer workflow that I'm going for with the DSJAS source code, as well as, the layout and how things are working in terms of pushing things to GitHub and other stuff like that. So, the first thing you'll probably notice is that we have uncommitted changes with source control. Now, I'm working on some features right now, so there's a whole load of new files that are being added, a whole load of things which have been changed. Essentially, right now I'm working on some more features for the admin panel that need to be at least present when the public beta launches, otherwise there will be just outright missing features, and that's a problem. I can't really push out something that's just flat out unfinished. I can push out something that's it's at least finished, but it's possibly substandard, because then we can get feedback and improve on it for the next time it's pushed out. And that is the most important thing to take away from the public beta. It's really important to tell exactly how you thought about it when you use the program. And especially it's important to talk about things like, do you think that it could fool people well enough? Do you think it could be extended well enough? How easy is it to use? It's very important to us to get honest, genuine feedback from users about their experience as a whole when using the site. I mean, after all, that's the whole point of launching a public beta, rather than just keeping this in development for a lot longer and just not allow anyone to use it. So, you can see here we have the source code, and I thought what I'd do before we get into talking about what we have so far and where the site's going, what's being worked on right now, I'm going to talk about the developer workflow. So, you can probably see here we have the public directory, which has been changed. Now, the public directory is actually a convention taken from things like Node.js apps and things built in frameworks like Laravel. The things which are going to be public on the site's code essentially, like public assets, are placed in the public directory. I think I've broken form slightly, because I've actually just put everything that's going to be distributed to users inside of the public directory. And the reason for that is actually that this is kind of like a source directory, but for websites, I suppose. And another reason I decided to call it public was I'm going to put in another directory called source, the source code for things like the SDK and scripts that automatically set up DSJAS, like installer packages and things. And that will be placed in the source directory. You'll also notice scripts here. This includes the developer workflow scripts. So for example, install. You'll notice that in the gitignore file, you'll probably see that we have user configuration ignored, which essentially means on the GitHub repository, there is no configuration inside of the public directory. You have htaccess, the fav icon, that's it. There's no configuration at all, but in order to have a working site, you need to have things like config.ini. Now, if you don't have those, DSJAS won't even be able to load the installer because it needs to be able to load it into memory before it can write. So, you need to have config.ini present before you can actually even get started with the site. Now that's not a problem for distributed packages because we can just use the package script to automatically add them. So you can see a big part of the package script is collecting information from the version information and copying the source tree, which will, copies across configuration as well. So the install script's main job is when you download from the GitHub repository in order to make changes, you can run the install script. In order to automatically create all the files that you're going to need. And you can see here the default values for all of them. So like module config comes with example disabled, theme config it comes with the default one enabled, and no validations run. And that allows us to do something very powerful, which is to select the default configuration directly for everyone checking out the GitHub repository. Because it would be quite difficult to almost impossible for us to do this without including it in source control, which we obviously don't want to do because then we might accidentally include our database password, and we're also going to have to be reverting the settings every time we want to commit, which then needs us to reinstall the site, and it would just be a big mess. But luckily, early on in development, we decided to ignore the user configuration and have it so that as a slight inconvenience, you have to run the install script before you're able to do any work on the site. And it's not really that much of a big deal, because if you're like me and you always work from the same place, the same machine, the same checkout location so that you keep your local changes, you only really have to run it once. I mean, after you've installed the site, you're basically ready to develop it more, but at the same time as well, we try to make it as frictionless as possible by adding a tasks entry, so automatically running package and install, for example, the build script and stuff like that in the VS Code configuration. So yeah, we try to make the developer experience as nice as possible, ready for when people are ultimately going to be checking out the code and trying to develop their own stuff for it. So, speaking of the code, the actual structure of the code itself is quite easy to understand. The uploads directory contains things which are uploaded to the site. So yeah, that's we got some files in there that probably shouldn't be there. I probably need to remember to delete those. They're going to cause issues, but yeah, the uploads is kind of self-explanatory. The include directory, you'll notice there's an htaccess file in here that denies all requests except for CSS, JS, and sitemap files. The reason for this is the include directory essentially contains all code which is going to be placed into another file. So, for example, the CSRF, utilities, and things like that. Inside of here, but there's also JavaScript, for example, the login thing that's actually empty, the login JS will be included in login pages and things like that, and also the components are PHP files that will be included into the admin dashboard. The reason they're here is so we can reuse the same components over and over again and not have to copy paste the code, so we can change it once and replicate it everywhere. And the API isn't actually a remote API, it's the API that will be included in themes. For example, in the general one, you can see that you get the current theme name, you can get the bank name, the URL, and then module descriptors are something to talk about at another time. It's a more complicated topic. The rest of these are user-facing, so for example, error contains the error page, which is now themable, so it just loads the theme from the back end. And assets contains, for example, this is the logo that's bundled with the site. Debug.php is a file which is automatically ignored by the site because I just use it for testing, and I think anyone else should have the opportunity to do that as well. If for whatever reason I really need to bundle it at a later date, I've added an automatic kind of built-in thing that detects it and quits the script. It just quits the script if it detects that you want it to have it disabled. Okay, so as well I need to talk about how the site's actually configured and how versioning and automatic updates will work. So let's talk about configuration first. So this is actually filled with just dummy information right now because I don't actually have a database set up, so this obviously isn't actually the database password I'm using. But this is what the DSJAS configuration looks like. I don't know why 100% it was that I actually decided to use ini files for the site configuration. It was probably something to do with the fact that PHP has built-in methods for passing ini files because, you know, PHP configures itself from ini. So I decided it would just be a nice, easy, kind of convenient way of configuring the site, especially seeing as most editors I have installed all support syntax highlighting for ini. So yeah, then config.ini was born, and most of the configuration, like if we go to admin and then site UI, we still have another config.ini which has settings to do with themes. So yes, in addition, this is a place where like bank-wide settings like bank domain and bank name are all set. And in the future, if we ever want to change these, all we have to do is change the version which is in scripts, and it will be replicated across to every developer working on the site, provided that they reconfigure, which they'll have to do. So that's how DSJAS configures itself. Also, we've used a library. I think it was like ini parser or something like that. And we actually decided to not use the default PHP built-in parser because it doesn't support dynamically changing and re-outputting of PHP, and it doesn't fully support it for JSON either, which is what I'm going to talk about next. So we're using a library for it. Version.json. Now this allows you to include information about the current release along with release notes and the release band that it's on to display in the update panel. Now this is ignored in git ignore by default as well. You can see that it's actually put underneath user configuration. This isn't user configurable, you can't actually change this and have it in the admin panel. This is set by the developers when they're packaging the site using the package script. You can see it here, and you can see later down it's writing to JSON. It's writing to version.json. So that's pretty much the entire developer workflow. I was going to talk a little bit as well about the documentation which you've added, talking a little bit about stuff like how the built-in modules work, and talking a little bit about you know, when to use certain different modules, when to use different themes. And these are actually on the GitHub repository, so you can actually see a rendered version of them, all looking nice and pretty in their markdown syntax. Like if we look at the minimal default theme, which is just a stripped down version of the default theme, it tells us the use case, the defining features, and possible giveaways that it could have when you're talking to a scammer. We've also got Felicity Bank, which is ported from another GitHub repository. And yeah, talking about all the upsides and downsides of using them. And so far the one built-in module that we have implemented, I've also put extensive documentation talking about how it can annoy people, how you can use it, you know, just the useful stuff about it. This will be updated quite a lot in the future because so far there's only 3 verification methods which are randomly generated that I've actually bothered to implement so far, so yeah. Hopefully at some point in the future the especially frustrating login process will be being updated with plenty of new and exciting verification methods that you will have lots of fun going through at 1 mile an hour with someone on the phone. So I mean, have fun with that. Yes, I need to talk as well about, though, this is the GitHub repository for DSJAS. It talks about it briefly, but it's all ready for everyone to check out as soon as it's all ready for people to check out as soon as the public beta is launched, which is a very, very good thing. It means that we can just we can quite literally just flip a switch at the bottom of here, make this repository public, and immediately everyone has access to it, and this link will start working. I have considered moving over to an organization called DSJAS, but I'm thinking about the implications of that right now because I don't think when you transfer ownership of a repository, GitHub sets up a redirect link, so it will quite literally break all of the links I've sent to people so far, and you know, just generally break stuff. Okay, so now let's talk for a second about the site itself. So, this is what we have so far. DSJAS it looks quite fleshed out. It looks like I would say like a normal banking site. Like if you look at this top page here, you would pass that off as a regular banking site. It looks somewhat professional, and that's the idea. We need to try and make it so that at a glance, this looks normal. It doesn't have to look great, it just needs to look normal. So, you'll also notice that most of the text on this page is quite muted, like white. This has actually got the Bootstrap text muted class, if I remember correctly. The things which are drawn attention to, though, are the login and apply now buttons, as well as the apply today and the get started buttons, which just send you to login. That's by design. The default theme tries to make it so that there is content all over the place, and jokes hidden within it, and all sorts of stuff. But the main features of the site are the focus, so login. Let's talk about content. Pretty much all of this is implemented, but the things which are to do is the services panel and some of the help and support. So let's start out with the things that need to be, the things that have been done, but then I'll talk about the things which need to be done. So, the support page, support has been completely done pretty much. So you've got what looks like a regular banking, like a regular banking support page with help logging into your account and managing, help reversing a transfer for when inevitably someone supposedly transfers too much money to you, get help with meeting in person, get help with lost or stolen cards. Just normal things that a bank might have on their support page. But also I've tried to put references for to security and scams and fraud and things like that on pretty much every page, which is why there is a security and fraud link here, and if you actually click on this, it will redirect you to Action Fraud, which is the UK look, it just says National Fraud and Cybercrime Reporting Centre. And it actually, if we look at the A to Z of fraud, you can see banking and credit. They've removed the refund scam one here, but yeah, I've put links to places like Action Fraud and the National Cybercrime Prevention Centre, I think it's called, all over the default theme, and they're never in like attention drawing places so that suspicious people will never immediately hang up or something like that. They're always just in subtle places. We also have a fraud prevention link. Right now this hasn't been made, and the links to most of these haven't been made either. The next thing I'm working on is the contact page, however, because I'm quite excited about some kind of interesting things I could be doing. I'm excited about some interesting things I could be doing with that. So the About Us menu is actually completely done, so you can see it talks about the origins and why we care, with some hilariously funny text that I came up with on here. But you'll notice once again that there's a fight on fraud, and help us fight fraud is here as well. And also visit the support center. The Our Mission page is it's kind of partially a joke, but also a play on the fact that the bank is free software, because it's got an XKCD joke about a cookie policy, but we've changed it so that the cookie policy just reads policy. And also, it's just the lesser general public license in its entirety. And it actually says at the bottom, thanks to XKCD and the FSF for the above texts. So yes, that's the mission statement of the bank. The lesser general public license from the Free Software Foundation. So, online banking, the main part of the site, the main feature that everyone needs. I've actually had some difficult decisions to have to make while doing this. For example, the Apply Now feature of the site. I want to make it so that it's possible for all themes to be able to do this, but not, it's not part of the default theme. I want to make it so that the default theme doesn't have to do this. And that's a difficult problem, because I have to make the endpoints for things like applications and logins. I need to design them in the way that I would want to have it designed if I were a theme developer. And the way that I've done that so far is by quite literally developing the theme along with the backend code. But if I want to suddenly separate those, that's where you get the problem. So far, I've built the theme page where it says there was a technical fault and the online applications are unavailable. That's going to stay that way until I come up with a better solution. However, I want to build backend code that allows themes to actually do this kind of thing. But you have to bear in mind as well that you can bypass the theme and you can go directly to URL endpoints and do actions on the site. For example, like you can log in without the if you make a post request to the login endpoint, you can technically sign yourself in without ever touching a login form. And yes, that does bypass modules, but you're not going to be doing that when you're on the phone with someone. So let's talk about that next, the online banking proportion of the site. So this is the login page. It says welcome back. It's got the custom logo that you can set in the settings, and then username and password with a link to the applications page, just the same as before. And it says, be secure, never give out your login details to anybody. At the bottom you'll see this form is protected by frustratingly good security, and this has actually been added by a module that I have enabled, and the reason I have this module enabled was because it was featured. This module was one that I made, which was actually featured in the official trailer, which went out, if not yesterday, then a couple of days ago. And so if I disable this and save, then we get back the vanilla form experience, which looks like this. And I'm going to leave it that way for now until I demo modules later on, because I just want to talk about the vanilla look and feel of the site. So when you install, you get some example credentials under the name of Edna, which is a reference to Kitboga live streams, and you can sign in. It's all functional, everything works that way. So yeah, let's sign in. So here is the DSJAS online banking dashboard, and we can see that Edna appears to be very rich right now. something that I'd like to work on is a solution that means that the account number isn't just an SQL auto-increment number as it is at the moment. What I'm thinking of doing is making it so that the account identifier, which is this right now, the the account number, and the actual account number separate values in the table. And granted, a lot of people wouldn't actually notice this, but I think that it could be a giveaway point, so I want to be very careful about this. But at the same time, changing the database once people have installed the program is very difficult to do without some kind of migration script or asking them to completely reinstall. So I'm going to have to be careful, and yeah, if this changes, it's going to need to change before the public beta launches. You can probably expect this to be improved at some point at least, though, so I wouldn't worry about being discovered because of the shoddy account number system. So these are real transactions which are stored in the database. I could get up phpMyAdmin and show you, but I forgot the administrator password, I've got to be honest, so I'll not do that right now. But these are actually selected from the database, checking for transactions which involved your accounts. So yes, that's a nice useful feature. It actually does show the transactions that were made. And actually, if we make a transfer later on, it will show up in here because they're ordered chronologically by the time, which is shown here, the timestamp. Okay, so let's talk first about the kind of advertisements we've got here. You'll notice once again we've got a bscam smart link which links to action fraud once again, and join CP rewards. With community public reward scheme, you can get cash for everyday purchases at high street stores. When you click on this link, it just says that the offer expired, but you'll actually notice that this number here is randomly generated by PHP code, and that shows the main reason I actually did this was to demonstrate that the themes can be dynamic and show, dynamic content, regardless of the fact that they are pretty much just static files. And the record low interest rates, the learn more thing just links you to apply, which once again is, it's broken. Okay, the accounts menu next. So this literally just displays the same table as on the dashboard. I'm going to improve this at some point, but for now, it just shows your accounts. Also, if you click on close your account, it says we're sorry to see you go, but also not, and then tells you that you have to see them in branch in order to close your account, and there is no way to do it from the banking side. You can do it in the admin dashboard though, and that's what I'm actually working on right now. You can close accounts in the admin dashboard and they'll disappear from here, but the records will still be in the table. There's another apply now link which tells you can't, and then there's links to the support page. The manage one gives you some banking statements, I guess, then shows you your bank accounts. It's just kind of a similar thing, and also a current timestamp in local time. So yeah, that's the accounts menu, and that's the dashboard here. Next is the main thing which you're probably going to be using, the make a transfer page. You could transfer between any of your accounts. You can't actually transfer between externals yet. I might work on that at some point, but you can also add memos and things like that. Then underneath it says that transfers are not reversible and can only be disputed with an hour of processing. Please be sure before you transfer. You can put any amount in here as long as it's larger than 0. Yeah, when you add a memo, it shows up as the description in the recent transactions table. Clicking on fraud just takes you to support/fraud. Clicking on contact again takes you to contact link. And log out obviously just logs you out. and then you can sign in again, or you can just go back to the home page. Clicking on transfer in here doesn't actually do anything other than just link you to the page. It's not actually dynamic, it doesn't plug it in. Maybe I'll work on that at some point as well. But really my concern and my priority towards the bank side content, as I call it, which is basically the themes, is making the default theme at least a minimal viable product. Making it so that if you use this on a call with someone, it will pass off as a banking site no matter what you do. You can see if we return to home, we get some dynamic behavior showing that we are actually logged in, and then it changes back once you log out again. The services thing, I was talking about it not being complete, and when I say not complete, I mean it's not even started yet. It just comes up with with some example text. If I actually switch back over to the source code and we go into the admin site UI directory, which is basically themes, and we look at the source code for services and then current, for example, it literally just returns a h1 tag that says coming soon. Whereas if we look at things like the index page, that's a huge amount of that's a very large amount of code rather than just one line that returns an h1 tag. But yeah, that's how themes are programmed. It's just a method which returns the required thing. Okay, switching back to the bank. Let's have a look. So the next thing I want to get finished is the admin panel, which is actually being worked on now. If we have a look back at the source code, public admin, and then bank. This is the bank settings, so things like adding transactions, closing or opening accounts, and things like that. Just managing it in the way that a bank actually could. All of that's being worked on. In fact, all of these are inside the admin bank directory. You'll see, apart from one that's in include, because that's the backend code for it. So, yeah, that's what's being worked on right now. If we have a look back at what we've got so far, let's go back to the dashboard. We've got a notification system, so these can be popped in and out by both extensions and the core code. They're usually done for stuff like validation fails or errors that occurred. Something that I'm not so happy about is right now the only thing you can do is clear all of them at once, which basically just deletes everything in the data directory they're stored in. And the dashboard just shows you a quick overview of what your site's passing off as right now. For example, I have mine set to Third Liberty Mutual Financial Group, which is actually from just a random name generator website. It shows you your version and the current active theme. It also shows you how many users you have, which, to be clear, is users of the bank, and how many site users you have, which are users of the admin panel here. The statistics panel isn't done yet. It just shows a white screen, and the bank panel is in progress. So you can see so far it just shows you an at a glance and then tasks you can take. If we go into users, this is what's being worked on. You can see that it allows us to create a bank account under this user's name. We can delete the user, which will also close all of their bank accounts. And we can also actually edit them. This is using the same exact code actually as the edit site user code, which it's that. But the difference between this and site users is you can't reset passwords on this screen for security. You can create a bank account for the user though, or migrate another account to it. So for example, if I look back on the users panel, we can see that Bob Parrington here, or Robert Parrington Ignatius as he's called, has bank accounts with IDs 3 and 4 associated with him, and bank accounts 1 and 2 are associated with Edna, which is the default account. If I wanted to migrate account 3 over to Edna, which I think is like a war bond account or something weird like that, then I can just go to edit user and then migrate an account to this user, and then it will allow me to go through the steps of just migrating it and setting all of the settings over. As far as I'm aware, I don't think I've done any more work on the rest of the panels. These are all just white screen, or at least, yeah, white screen if you click on them. However, things which are completely done are the settings panel. So, we've got, for example, the general settings here allow you to change just the general settings of the site, and bank appearance, things like that. So, you can see here you can change the name at a glance. So for example, if I decided I wanted to set the name of the bank, I'm just going to Control X this so I have it saved, and then let's say if I wanted to call this like LR, I spelled Jenkins wrong, LR Jenkins Banks. If I then press save, and then if we switch back over to the tab, you'll notice that it's now called LR Jenkins Banks. Or if I could change it to financial, then save, it's now LR Jenkins Financial. Then if I just paste this back in, it's now called Third Liberty Mutual Financial Group. And that's one of the main features of DSJAS, but it's also the easiest to use and simplest, which is the great thing about it. The next thing about it is the bank URL. This is kind of a weird one, because you have to set this up in your Etsy hosts file before you can actually use this feature. And the reason for that is you have to tell your computer to associate the URL in here with HTTP localhost, or wherever the site is, wherever the site's hosted. And the reason that you tell it to DSJAS is so that it can actually append it to the beginning of links, but also so that we can get the protocol right. So I'm hosting this on just a local development MAMP server with no SSL certificate. So if I put HTTPS here, then it would always be flagged as insecure by Chrome and it would refuse to load it. So it's quite a useful feature here. Security settings. Now more things are to come in the security settings panel, but right now the only setting is disable access to admin panel. So let's say that you're in the middle of a call and suddenly they start getting suspicious, they think you might have DSJAS installed, they're checking for it, they're trying to find out whether they can go to any of the URLs. The admin panel is always there, and the only way to stop them from going to this and fool them into thinking it's not there is this setting. Essentially, when this is unchecked, it will make it so that all admin panel URLs just redirect to the 404 page, giving the impression that it was never there in the first place. The problem I have with this is, as the setting panel says, however, you will be unable to access this page again to disable the setting, and will need to edit the configuration file on disk to revert this. Now what it actually means is, if I just get config open here, you'll notice that allow access to admin is just a boolean here. It's either 1 or 0. Now, if I go back to the admin panel and I uncheck this and save, you'll notice we immediately lose access to the admin panel. Now, settings $success was set, which shows that it was actually successful. But if we go to the admin panel, because this is in debug mode, it will say access denied. But on your versions of the site, it will actually show, it will actually say 404. Now, if we actually go back into the configuration, you'll notice this is now set to 0. To get back into your admin panel, you have to set it to 1. Then if we go to /admin, you can see we then get access again. Now, even when this is enabled, your sessions are still preserved, so you can still go straight back to it. You don't have to log in again. In the future, I'm thinking about adding another setting which says disable access from IP address, so you could disable it on the virtual machine that you're running in with the remote access software, for example. I think that would be a great feature which I'll work on as soon as I can with, with all of this being done. Underneath, you can then remotely set your database settings, or you can actually instruct it to run without a database, or at least try to. The this disables logins, user accounts, and online banking. It's basically alright if you just want to set up. It's okay if you just want to set up like a quick and dirty install with where it literally just shows the front page or something like that. You know, it's not an ideal mode to be running in. It's not bad, but it's okay. Okay, next is the update panel. So this isn't actually done yet because we need to have infrastructure set up before we can actually have any of this working. So for example, we'll need to have it requesting to GitHub API endpoints. We'll need to have it set up so that GitHub can return alpha versions. We'll need to have all of that set up. And currently we just don't, because it can't actually request to the GitHub API for a private repository. If you want to do that, you have to pay for GitHub Pro, or make the repository public. When it goes public, it'll be perfectly fine. We can just have them requesting to GitHub to check the latest available versioning number and seeing whether we need to update. It's fine. But as it says, DSJAS is in alpha and automatic updates are not yet set up. So you can check for updates, but you're always up to date. Okay, next is the accounts panel. So this is essentially what the bank users panel will look like. It'll look something like it later. But you can edit existing users, and I did say it's using the exact same code as the bank one. It looks the same with slightly less buttons. Or you can see that we have 4 users, and we can also create users, and we can also reset the passwords on existing users. So, for example, if I forgot my password, I could just put like new password in here, and then confirm, and then we'd have our password reset. We can also create users. This will auto increment the user ID as well, so we'll get user with an ID of 10. And yeah, this user will then be able to log in with the credentials immediately, provided that they're enabled. That's another feature that I quite like. You can enable and disable user accounts straight from this panel here. So if you try to log in as a user who's been disabled, it will say that your credentials are incorrect over and over again, regardless of whether they were right or not. It also stores whether you're a new account so that it can give you a welcome message and give you a tour of the admin panel, hopefully at some point in the future. And also it stores whether it's enabled or not, obviously. So we can disable, you can't actually disable your own account, but we could disable admin 2. We confirm it, then he's now been logged out and also locked out, so he can't log back in. Oh, if we enable him again, it says enabling this account will allow anyone with logon credentials to gain immediate access to the site. So I'm going to confirm, and then he's enabled now. We can also edit these users, but it says that the account's disabled, you know, and they won't be able to access their account or profile, even if it's been edited. You can also delete users. You can't delete your own account, but you can delete others, and it is permanent, and all the data will be deleted. So that includes stored notifications, stored audit logs. It's everything associated with the column in the with the row in the database, essentially. And SQL will fill it with dummy data, either zeros or whatever it fills it with, and that table is gone when you request for it for not 404, but the SQL error will be returned. There is no way to get that data back, unfortunately, which is why it's basically asking, are you sure you're sure, before you actually delete a user, because it's very easy to accidentally slip and click on this when you're trying to click on enable, for example. And poor Adam Smith, if we're trying to disable his account temporarily because he's had his password guessed. If we accidentally delete it and he loses all of his stuff, that would be very good. So we've got a confirmation page. So that's about that for the accounts panel. Next, the modules and themes panel, the main part of the site. Now, if you watched the trailer, which went out a couple of days ago, you'll see how themes and modules interact with the site. So essentially, you know, themes changing how it looks, with modules changing how the theme behaves. So like how the buttons look or what they do when you click on them. It's best to explain this with an example. Unfortunately, I reverted my changes to test theme a couple of days ago because I broke something. So now, if we actually activate test theme, it's going to have to re-unpack it. But yeah, if we activate test theme, it literally just shows the same coming soon message as the other one. But we get back our default theme if we enable it. So that does prove that you can switch between themes and it does work. But I need to re-implement the minimal theme and Felicity Bank because those are quite good, I have to admit. So you can also install them from other sources. You're not just stuck with the ones that are installed. You can upload a package which the developer provides. That's an important feature because I have an example theme here, and if we upload that and install it, then yeah, we'll get another theme in this registry here that we can actually enable and use, and that's really important to be able to do. It is important to note though that themes do have a lot of control over your server. It's basically remote code execution, so be very careful with what themes you install. In addition, you can install it from a URL because I noticed that it's kind of slow to download theme packages, especially big ones. And then you're basically redundantly downloading and then uploading it again to the server, which is, you know, kind of a waste of time. So instead, you can now provide an installer URL, and the first thing it does is verifies it's actually a valid installer URL by reaching out to the server and checking whether it can download DSJAS manifest. Then it downloads the package and does the same code, and it uses the exact same code from there as the theme package, because essentially both of these put a theme package on the server. Now the validator is an important feature because not all themes are created equally, and some themes are just bad and don't work properly. So the validator can tell you why it's not working properly, if it's not working, what's going wrong, how you can report it to the developer, anything you can do really to just help out. Or even if something's gone wrong on the DSJAS side, it can sometimes automatically fix them. The validator's not implemented right now, but it's basically set up to go from when you click this button, and then it can just pop notifications onto the home screen. And then at the bottom there's just something that tells you that you can be making your own theme for DSJAS. Right, modules. So I already demoed these, but it's important to see the distinction with the install process, that you can actually only install these from downloading them. It's because of a technical reason to do with how modules are unpacked and how their configuration is handled. But the point is, we can't actually make a request straight before we do the setup that the module needs because of some limitations with PHP. It's also important to note there is actually a max file size when uploading both modules and themes, and although it's very forgiving, it's like 40 gigabytes or something like that. I can't remember the exact number, but if your theme is larger than 40 gigabytes and it's literally just static HTML and images, then you need to downscale your images a little bit because they're far too large. And it's also important to note that DSJAS didn't just arbitrarily set this limit. This is being set by an htaccess file because PHP will automatically deny PHP will automatically deny uploads for extremely large files. For example, if you have a look here, we actually have to manually tell PHP, stop, please stop limiting our file size and allow us to make it slightly larger. So it's uploaded in post, so we up that size a little bit. Yeah, we'd love to allow larger themes, but in general, 40 gigabytes. That's a large theme if you're uploading that amount. And in general as well, 40 gigabytes is going to take way too long to even. Well, no, it's going to take way too long to even upload. So I don't know. Don't try and install modules and themes that are over 40 gigabytes because PHP, again, because of a limitation in PHP, we can't actually provide error checking for it properly. Because for some reason the PHP developers decided it would be a good idea that when a file size is exceeded, it just wipes everything and runs the script as though nothing happened. So for example, there'll be no indication of error at all. The files will be non-existent as far as our script is aware. So for the most part, we'll just end up redirecting you. I've added some code to make sure you don't end up going in an infinite loop because of this. But at the same time, I wish PHP would change that because it's a bad idea. I'll demo this later, but I'll possibly demo it later. I don't know how much time I have left, but yeah, the modules panel completely done. It's fine. Extensions. Now this is a weird one because I've not actually started making this yet. This is one of the only features so far that I have absolutely no idea how to even get started with making. I have a hooks library installed by a guy called Gubertini, I think you pronounce it, and that's being used for the hooks and filters system for themes and modules so far. But extensions, they're going to be a weird one. Okay, the advanced panel lets you edit your configuration in RAW in case for some reason you need to do that. So for example, I could set this to 0 and brick my site and lock myself out. I'm not going to do that though. And for example, if you accidentally broke your configuration and you need to reset it, you can do it here. It's important to note as well though that you can break your configuration pretty much in its entirety from here. If you accidentally set this to like a wrong value or you accidentally put a space after it, I'm going to discard that now so that I don't accidentally break something, but you could lock yourself out of your account and you might have to edit on disk. This was originally meant to make it so that you don't actually have to edit on disk in order to well, edit on disk, but I forgot the fact that if it's any of these settings that you've mucked up, you've basically locked yourself out of this page as well. So you need to be careful with this panel. The help link doesn't do anything yet, and the reason for that is it was originally going to link to the GitHub wiki, but that's not set up yet, so I can't do that. And the My Account panel just links you to the edit page for your own account, and you'll see that it says this is you, and that it will put it on your profile. The go to site link just links you to the site, and log out does what you'd expect it to. This is the login experience. This is what you'll see when you go to the login page, obviously without the login success, just as this. Yeah, that's the DSJAS admin panel. So that's pretty much all of the features so far. So before I go, I'm actually going to talk quickly about my vision for where DSJAS can go next, and what we can be doing to try and maximize the potential for it. So already I've been getting some great feedback from people talking about how it looks kind of exciting, people in the YouTube comments saying that they'd love to get involved. Thank you to everyone who's excited about this, and thank you to people who've messaged me and given me some feedback and things that you could do to realize the dream of DSJAS as well, because I'm really excited about this project. I think it could have great potential and help a lot of people out there with their hobby. So the main thing people have been asking is, to make the site look the way you want it, can you customize the theme to change things like the colors and the images and stuff like that? Not yet. That's something that will come later. I've thought of a system called dynamic style sheets that I might come up with, where you can change values that a theme exposes, and then the theme can just put those as classes in its HTML, and then DSJAS will inject a CSS file which has been automatically generated with the required values added in. And the reason that would be great is because from the theme's perspective, all it needs to do is create a CSS file with some blank rules, and DSJAS just fills the rest in for it based on what the user feels like. You could even set defaults and things like that. And in general, it's a very exciting prospect for a feature. I'd quite like to get working on that as soon as I've done the 10 million other things I'm working on right now, and the to do with the admin panel and getting the bank-side content done. In terms of modules, people were talking about how it's somewhat unreliable system at the moment, to do with the fact that you had to rely on the theme telling you where to put stuff, and you have to rely on the fact that DSJAS was able to correctly find certain elements on the page. I'm working on trying to draw up some kind of specification or protocol that themes should follow in order to interface correctly with modules, and that would probably be one of my issues as well, the fact that modules, they feel kind of clunky in the way that they interact with the theme, because the theme is forced to add these things called module descriptors, which tell it where to put things on the page, but then if it doesn't provide those, the module just won't run at all, and yeah, it's just kind of it's an unreliable system in general, so I think it'll be great to try and improve that any way that I can. Right now also it's using Gubertini's Hux system. I can't say his name properly, but yeah, it's using a Hux system written by a guy called Gubertini, and I'm not sure whether it's the best option out there. Sure, it's served us well so far, it's doing a great job at loading themes, it is doing as well as it could do, but as well as it could do might not be enough, unfortunately, and especially when we start to add things like the extension API, is starting to get into the realms of where it's going to be extending beyond its intended use case, and we might have to find something else. So I'm getting on towards an hour, so I might as well fill in the final 2 minutes or so talking about some visions of the future and the timescale of things. So, in terms of the timescale of development, I'm working on this pretty much every single day. There's been at least one commit being made on the local machine, if not pushed to GitHub, it's been at least made on the local machine pretty much every day. And although that might make it look like development's being done hastily, I'm just trying to push out as many updates as possible that have the content that I'd like to have in them, in order to keep the project alive, because we don't want to have some kind of dead game or dead project situation where my own project becomes the thing that I criticize some other fake banking projects for in the intro video, because I need to keep DSJAS under development so that we can keep making it better, but we can only start to really do that once the core stuff has been done. And that's the main thing, we need to get the core done, and then I can start improving stuff and adding the features that we promised, like dynamic style sheets and a better system for blocking IPs from the admin panel. And some of them are trivial to make, some of them might require some more overhead, but another thing that we're trying to work on is performance, because at the moment loading lots of modules or lots of themes, it's not very well optimized. It doesn't work that well. So I'm trying to make it so that system is a lot better at what it does. But as soon as the code goes on GitHub, we can pretty much consider the project open for business. So, with that, we're getting on to about an hour now. That will conclude the first ever DSJAS devlog. So, thank you massively for watching, and I'm going to say this at the end of all videos that go out. Try to catch us for the public beta once it launches. You'll be able to tell that it's launched by the fact that the GitHub repository goes live. So yeah, thank you, and I'll continue pushing out update videos and updates when they're happening and as development happens.